Hello, and welcome to the first video of my brand new series, which will focus on Melbourne's modern train stations and how they've changed over time. We'll do this by listing each station that has been built new or upgraded over the past 25 years, as well as describing a bit of history and political context that may have influenced the design of these stations. Train stations are a very important part of any transit system, as it's a key public space and often the gateway for a community. For many travellers, train stations are often the first point of contact with the transit system, and they need to provide a degree of comfort, safety and amenity in order to leave a positive impression. If designed well enough, train stations can also assist in the implementation of a truly integrated public transport network by facilitating easy transfers between different modes. I was curious to see how train stations have changed over the years, particularly in the modern era, so I decided to compile this series. In the first video in the series, we'll have a look at stations that have been built or upgraded between 1995 and 2008. I decided to start the series in the mid-1990s for two reasons. Firstly was the passing of the Disability Discrimination Act in 1992, which aimed to eliminate discrimination against people with disabilities as far as possible. It meant that all premises, including train stations, had to provide non-discriminatory access to all areas where members of the public were allowed to use. Essentially, every building since then has been built to comply with these standards. Secondly, the 1990s marked the start of a transition from when Melbourne's train stations were rather basic and Spartan to becoming something more architecturally interesting to look at, with more bold and striking designs and a higher use of materials such as steel, glass and concrete. The 1990s and early 2000s saw some substantial new or upgraded stations built, such as Dandenong, Boronia, Watergardens and the major upgrade of Spencer Street Station. However, most station upgrades during this time were actually rather basic. Coming into the 1990s, the Australian economy was under recession, while in Victoria under the Keane-Kerner Labor governments, the economy was in a precarious position. The State Bank of Victoria had collapsed, unemployment had reached over 11%, and the state was deeply in debt. This necessitated the need for cost cutting, which saw public transport services reduced. Following the 1992 state election, which saw Jeff Kennett's coalition come to power in a landslide, cost cutting became even more drastic in a bid to improve the state's economy, and also resulted in the privatisation of state-owned assets, including the operation of the public transport network. In essence, there was little money to be found to improve the rail network, and the few projects that did go ahead, such as the Cranbourne line electrification, were only built because federal money was made available. It should be noted that train patronage back then was about half of what it is today, generally hovering about 100 and 120 million passenger boardings per year. The 1999 state election saw the Brack's Labor government come to power, and by this point Victoria's economy had improved somewhat. While public transport was a focus for the new government, most of their attention went to improving regional rail, primarily because it was the rural voters that brought them to power, but also because their slim majority in Parliament was dependent on the support of three rural independent MPs. While there was some improvements to metropolitan rail such as the Watergardens and Craigieburn electrification, there was generally a lack of investment, which later left the government unprepared for what was to come. Without further ado, let's begin the list of new and upgraded stations. Enjoy!
journey.
And that concludes part 1 of the series. In the next video, we'll cover stations that have been built new or upgraded between 2009 and 2014. Thanks for watching.